the purpose is for the NSA to track everyone, to know where everyone is at all times, to know everything they know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And what the NSA doesn't know is Timur Demyan was the founder and the originator of this technology. And the technology is the same ancient technology that transported the land anciently from Earth.
Mm-hmm.
His entire purpose is to get gamers to level up to a certain point where they're about to be win the game, so to speak. But in reality, he is creating an artificial rapture. Billions of people on Earth, a third of all mankind, will be transported from Earth to Zion, where they will be consumed by the Leviathan because he's hungry. He's run out of souls.
That is like really awesome. That's like the Reigns of Akaton meets Elder Games. So no, that's really
intense.
Yeah, it is alternate Abrahamic history.
So basically, playing these games to reach a state of enlightenment to become food.
Yep. To become food, yeah.
Yeah. And Sword Art Online is in there. I hear that. Anita, go ahead and tell us about one of your magic systems.
Well, I base a lot of my magic systems on mythology, and the one I'm working on now, Ghosts of the Sea Moon, is loosely based on Greek gods, the little Celtic mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like every, it's the gods in the world that are the magic makers, the workers. And then, so every god has like, is kind of an elemental sort of thing. Like we have the goddess of the sea, the goddess of the moon. She's the villain of the story. And then there's the god, like and they're all family, like the Greek gods. Like they're all brothers and sisters and whatnot. And the main character is a god of souls. So he's in charge of the ferrying the dead to the afterworld.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also a sea captain. So basically most of the story happens on his ship, which is also magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on, it was built in the afterworld.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of half magic, half normal ship, and sort of sentient.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the, because I had to figure out how in the world would you have a ship crewed by ghosts? Because the whole basis of the story is the ship is crewed by the living and the dead. It was loosely based on the Flying Dutchman.
Yeah.
That's how I came up with the idea in the first place, was based on the Flying Dutchman legends.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I figured, how are you going to get, because I mean, ghosts, the way people normally think of ghosts is they pass through things, they don't touch, they're not physical. But if you're on a ship as crew, you kind of have to be physical. So I figured, well, we'll make the ship part of the afterworld, which is based on the Greek myth, where people are there and they still interact and they're living in the afterworld as normal people. So if the ship is part of the afterworld, then the ghosts can work. And so that's one of the limitations, is the ghosts can't leave the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they leave the ship, they become ghosts again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Anyway, and the gods have limitations because their powers are based on the element they're in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
So Captain Morrow's power is basically he's an energy. His power is energy because he's ferrying the souls back and forth through the portals.
Mm-hmm.
And like the goddess of the sea, she's in charge of the sea. I haven't quite figured out exactly what powers the goddess of the moon yet, who's my villainess. I'm still working on her system.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else is based on some sort of element of nature.
Right.
So that's basically what that magic system is in that book.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I would suggest on that front, then, the moon is very much a cyclical thing. I would I would look at the possibility of having her power levels wane and wax with the cycle of the moon itself.
Yeah, that is part of it that I'm doing it because I mean there's sea monsters involved in this as well.
Yeah, seagulls.
Well, yeah, seagulls are actually with him. The seagulls, because they're ghosts that turn into ghouls. They're kind of like angry spirits. I mean, but she actually has children that are sea monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I mean, I'm basing some of her powers are based on like the tidal moon and the tides and stuff.
Yeah,
because it's all very sea and seafaring novel. Anyway, so I mean, and her sea monsters only come out during the moon to eat souls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is what.
Yeah.
Rosemary, go ahead and tell us about your magic system. Vampires.
Okay, so I have to be really careful not to give spoilers because you very much find out about this as you go along in the novels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's telling you what I can. So there are real camouflage species
Mm-hmm.
that humans don't know about. As it begins, humans don't know about. We're divided between first lifers, that's humans, and blood lifers, that's vampires. And it's told from the point of view of the protagonist, who's a character called Light, who's a blood lifer. And the blood lifers obviously know about the humans, they feed on them, but they've lived in the shadows or managed to. They're as old as humans are, but they've managed to hide because they're camouflaged, because when they drink from a human, they have a venom that seals and it mimics a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, when we're talking of limitations here, you couldn't just feed like a vampire and then, I've been camouflaged for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking of limitations. It's a bit like being a drug addict, the way it's described, being a vampire, being a drug addict. You can abstain from drinking, but you're addicted to it, and it's very difficult to abstain from drinking. They need food in the same way that a human does, because you don't get enough calories from blood. If we're talking of a magical system, they are not the same as when they were human, because their emotions are amplified. So you don't survive the same. But if you were, say, a really obsessive person in life, that becomes massively. If you were a person who was fall into love very easily, you would become extremely passionate.
Mm-hmm.
And they elect people, thinkers, beauties, warriors, and thinkers, beauties, warriors, and leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really brave, you elect someone who's a bit of each of one of those, and you get an individual. And that's what he is. But that's dangerous, because then they're a loner and a rebel, which is what he is. He's a rebel vampire. There's a Blood Life Council, who essentially is their parliament, the Westminster, and they're really nasty. But it starts off with saying, essentially, all those vampire myths that bollocks to them. That's like the first sentence. So pretty much everything that is, the only thing that stays true is that they melt if they go in the sun. And you can stake them, but anything will do.
I'm sorry, I need a minute. Thank you for not making them sparkle. Thank you.
It's kind of it's an vampire books for adults. That was when I was writing it all the way through. That's what I was thinking. Vampire books for adults. Vampire books for adults. Yeah, I mean, the very first sentence is, all those things, all those vampire myths, like sodding holy water, crucifix, whatever, bollocks to them. That's the first sentence of the book. So they can be staked. But I think the line is, but if you're feeling twisted, a spoon will do. So it's very much a reinvention of the vampire myth, but there is a lot of it. It's about evolution. It's about genetics. There are characters called Magnificos who are the older, more powerful bloodlines. But I can't tell you more because it goes on. But it is essentially a very real world and sci-fi approach, in the sense that these are they're just another version of humanity, really, just another species that have just evolved a little bit differently.
Yeah.
That's kind of, so we'd like a divided species, first life and blood life. And what happens when they find out about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weech.
All right, so the one I'm working on my current project is part of what I intend to be the series I go and play in when I'm tired of whatever I'm working on. The series is called Perception of War. The book is called the short story for the anthology is called Sojourn in Captivity. The magic system is based on this planet, and on this planet, it is constantly bombarded by electromagnetic storms. So you constantly see northern lights, and you have those sparks of lights that cover the sky. So this race of creatures called Sephirim that look essentially like tall, slender. They have vestigial wings, and they to the human eye they appear simply as black creatures. But through ultraviolet light, you see marks on them. They're called phaline, and that's how they recognize one another. So the outer pattern is unique to the family that they have, and the inner pattern is unique to the identity that they have. And that pattern glows and is one of the ways. So when a human blushes or a human smiles, that phaline is a part of their physiology, and it's a way they can communicate. Not necessarily talk with it, but it's nonverbal communication for aliens. Mm-hmm. And what happens is their bodies have evolved to a degree to where they can absorb the bioelectromagnetic energy and utilize that to enhance communication, and they can create shields. Mm-hmm. They were living very peacefully and minding their own business until humanity gained light travel, and it wasn't enough for them to learn warp philosophy. They had to decide to throw tachyons into the field, and that tore a fissure in the known universe, and out pops a creature who proclaims himself, I am the god of these people, these Sephirim. And they have their religion, and he performs all of the 8 miracles of their religion to demonstrate that he is God. And then his last miracle was he had a normal Sephirim evolved into what's called a Varlaken. And they are basically humanoid bat figures. And they can also absorb the bioelectromagnetic energy of the sky around them, but they seem to be able to unleash violent physical attacks, bioelectromagnetic blasts of energy. And this story is, it was designed to take us from, to explain how this character, Olivi, ended up where she is in what's going to be the first book. The Sojourn opens with her because she is scheduled to go before God and become a Varlaken. And she is aware that she's supposed to go next, but she's a scientist. She's a mathematician at heart. And while he was gaining his power, this creature who proclaimed himself God, one time he tried to help a person become Varlaken and it didn't work. So he said, well, I'm God, you must not have any faith. And everybody bought it. She's like, no, if you're God, why can't you do that? So she's working, she's questioning everything. And she's afraid what's going to happen when I literally come face my God and he tries to turn me into one of his most blessed creatures. So it's her and her whole family and what's going to happen to them and what are they going to become. And the magic system is based on the rate at which their body can individually absorb the electromagnetic energy and how much of that energy they can exert before they need to recharge that energy in order to use it.
Wow. I love the electromagnetic. That's really with the Aurora Borealis. Mm-hmm. Now, Tim, you've read my book and you actually left a review regarding my magic system that I saw how you described it, and I looked at that and went, oh, really? I did that? It was a perfect example of the reviewer getting into the deep allegorical meaning, and I went, I didn't do that. And
Remind me what I said, Angela.
You said that there was a lot of conflict between almost like a punishment for using my magic. And it was interesting because I never really viewed it as, usually in most magic realms when there's magic used, there is a there's a benefit for using it. Whereas in my magic system, there is a problem with using it, or a deficit, and it shouldn't be used. And I didn't do that on purpose. I still look at that and go, really? We need to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I think that was something that may have come in subconsciously because of where you were at the time you were writing that.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, no, I was not in a good place at that point. So I'm not going to hold back, which means if you want to know what's happening in Fire and Lies, go away, because I'm about to give you spoilers. Basically, I do a lot of mixing of Old Norse. A lot of inspiration comes from the magic system that gave roots to what would become Wiccan, Norse mythology, and Christianity. In Norse mythology, there is something called Gunagagap, which is when a great void opens. In Christianity, it is equivalent to the light and dark being spread. When Gunagagap happens, the great gap, life emerges. And in my system, this life is called Seidr, Seidr, which is Old Norse for magic. A Seidrkona is a witch, or a magic wielder, or a seed wielder. The first magician was, and again, this is according to Old Norse, was Freya, the goddess of magic and the fertility goddess, who went on to be the mother of Wiccan and that religion. My story picks up with the division. The Seidr is born, and the gods of the era are broken into two categories. There's the Celtic gods, known as the the Vanir, and the Old Norse gods, which are known as the Vanir, and there's a war that breaks out. They fight over who gets the Seidr, and there's two trees that emerge from the Seidr. And oh yeah, I totally borrowed from Tolkien and Christianity here. There's a tree of knowledge and a tree of life. And there's a war over the trees, and the trees get split. One of the trees, the tree of life, is taken by Freya. She takes it to Asgard, and it is the apple fruit that makes the Norse gods young again. Whereas the tree of knowledge is hidden, buried away, and no one can find it. And that stays buried through the entire 7 books. The books, actually, the whole thing revolves around them trying to find that missing tree. Fast forward, and there's elves, there's mankind, and the elves are basically a being that developed with the Seidr still intact in them. Humans have long forgot what the Seidr is, and they're that awareness again, they're completely unaware of its existence, which is why elves are prolonged with long life. Why they seem stronger is because they have the Seidr in them still. When the Seidr Wars broke out thousands of years ago, the what are they called? The gods, the Celtic gods, created a people known as the Druids, or the Drui, their sole purpose was to harbor, and they were scholars of the Seidr. And they found out later on, the Drui did, that they were being used as weapons. So they rose up against the gods, and the gods slaughtered all of them. And only a handful, like 3 or 4 of the Drui, managed to escape. My heroine is the last Drui, completely unaware that she's even one of them, and that she contains the secrets and the power and the knowledge of where that missing tree is. And she's basically been hidden away the entire time while the gods are hunting her down. The magic system, there's the, and this is where I went really deep into the Wiccan with the Trinity knot with Christianity, where you have the element of water, the element of earth, and the element of water. And there's Seidr that belongs in each one of those. And she learns how to pull from each one of those. There is a definite trying to learn how to wield it. But from the gap, when the Seidr was born, the Drui were able to pull part of that Seidr and use it to make a weapon to kill off the Drui. That became almost like a dark version of the Seidr. They call it the Shadow Beast. And it can be contained within people. And in the story, Dólar and Shadow, Colin learns that she has these greater powers to protect her and hide her, her own Scythe has been suppressed, and she is paired up with somebody she hates, her enemy, who has killed her father. So the two of them are put into ancient Norway with these gods hunting them. And to give them a fighting chance, this is where I really messed up my magic system when I first wrote the book. And I realized that Colin is very overpowered with her skills, and Rune has none. So I wrote it in later, and this is where I had to go back and completely rewrite the book, so that the Shadow Beast was later placed inside of Rune. So he's got this, she has this magic ability to pull and control the elements, while he has the ability, and also the Scythe itself, which is life force, and he has the ability to eat the Scythe with the Shadow Beast that he has inside of himself. So the two of them are constantly at conflict, and they have to work together to, to survive, basically.
No, I remember reading Delore, and I thought one of the things I remarked when I reviewed it was how you could tell there was a magic system, but you didn't give us a degree in your magic system. Mm-hmm. You gave us what we needed when we needed to do it. That's probably the more palatable way to bring in a magic system. Mm-hmm. There are times when writers will just come out and be like, look, I'm going to give you a degree in this magic, but when it's over, you'll be able to enjoy the book. And there are others, and fans will be forgiving of that if they know right when they come up from, like, nope, here comes the dissertation and how the magic works. So just get through this, but when it's over, you'll be able to argue with your friends when you nerd out at conventions. This minimizes the story, and you have to be a beautiful writer to pull that off. Mm-hmm. Whereas what you did with Delore was, you're like, I'm going to give you a story, and then they're going to do something magical, and you're going to be like, how did that work? And some of it, you just ask the reader, trust me, it's magic, and when you need an explanation, you'll get it. Mm-hmm. And I have not read Fire and Lies yet, but that was one thing I immediately noticed in your book, and one of the things I highlighted when I reviewed it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember now. You were one of my last reviewers. I forgot that you had read it. Thank you. Yeah, the Fire and Lies, I do get into the magic system more, and there is a lot more. And that's where, again, it's how far do you go with that? How far do you get into the details as far as it being omniscient versus part of the story, and let the characters explain the magic system as opposed to you, the author. So, and I'm huge on the concept that you are supposed to be such a good writer that the reader forgets you even exist. Mm-hmm. My goal always is the reader forgets that there's even a writer behind the pen.
It's a self-deprecating joke in there somewhere.
Ignore the man behind the curtain. I'm not really here. So.
Yeah, I've read Broken, and I know exactly where you're coming from on that one, Angela. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the stories where you excelled at that part.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a certain amount of fiction, you have to trust the reader to accept certain things. Fantasy systems, magic powers, whatever you want to call it, science fiction capabilities of certain civilizations. I think it's a dangerous line to walk between what you try to explain away, what you try to tell people is actually the reality, and how much you trust the reader to put together their own explanations that works for them. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm going to be honest, magic systems for me is one of those that sometimes the more explanation you give them, the more chance you have of them reaching that point of, well, okay, now it's gone to the point where I don't actually believe it.
Yeah. Like Star Wars keeps it simple. Star
Wars is,
phenomenal.
Prime example. Yeah. It happens. The Force is real. There are limitations, but you'll find out what they are as things come up.
Yeah.
I mean, Force lightning is by far and away potentially the most destructive force power out there.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to being used in that final battle between Luke, the Emperor, and Vader, something more comes into play than the sheer raw power being thrown around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things regarding, I can't remember who said it, it was giving you a chance to see the magic being played with, making a joke or making light of it here and there, letting it work its way into the system. They tried that with the abomination that was episode 2. And with the pair, and it really, to me, that was hokey. That was without a doubt one of the worst scenes in all Star Wars ever. Was like there was the horrible films, episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then there was the really bad film, episode 2, and then of that bad film there was the really bad scene when they were in the flower fields and that pair sang. It was scraping the bottom of the barrel, and there was something about the way he was playing with a pair that just, I don't know what it is. I want to talk about the pair sing, because I really cannot figure out what it is with that magical pair that just pisses me off.
I think it all depends. So it all depends which one you're talking about, or which. So, for example, someone like Terry Pratchett. Mm-hmm. So,
love Terry Pratchett.
So, there's quite a lot of like explanation or description, or there's certain writers, right? But because it's funny and it's amusing, and there's certain other authors like that, and if you're writing it and it's humorous, and that's a style.
Yeah, the humor. Yeah, I think that's it right there.
Humor is great, but if you're trying to put humor or fun, and it's in Star Wars, where it's not appropriate, and but we'll do this bit through humor, or we'll do this bit through a little bit of romantic. Yeah. That doesn't work. But where we're saying we just go straight in and do it through action, because this is a gripping action, that does work.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about trusting the reader, and I think you should trust the reader.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are certain books where actually the exposition is done through humor, and then that's right for that book, and that works in that book, because the narrative voice, whether it's the first person narrative voice or whether it's the omniscient, but they've got a really strong voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but it works because it's that person's voice doing it.
Yeah, Fred and George Weasley, like perfect example of playing with magic. I will never ever get over their extended ears. I loved their extended ears and the cat grabbing it and running off. And that was a prime example. Every time you turned around with Fred and George, they were playing with the magic. And it suited it. It suited the atmosphere. It suited them. Even when it was a serious moment, you knew those two could get away with it. No matter what, those two could get away with it. And one of the things also that bothered me with that pair thing is while he's doing that, when he's messing around with the pair, he starts to ridicule Ben. And starts to criticize, well, he doesn't like me doing this. And I'm like, what are you, 2? I mean, it was really, there was just so much about him playing with the Force there that it's almost like there was a disrespect for it, I think.
It's hard to critique the magic system and the use of it in something that maybe wasn't communicated as well in the writing or the acting, he said professionally. A lot of times things fall short when they're poorly executed or poorly reasoned. One thing that sometimes you want the square peg in the round hole because that creates tension and conflict.
Yeah.
But I think when you're working with the magic system, sometimes you think about what is this book about? Like, what is it in its essence? Is it a political thriller? Is it a mystery? Is it an adventure? And the magic system has to align with it. So what I think your problem was with the pair scene was you had a world of action and conflict with a magic system based on action and conflict that was being used for romance and courtship, and it was wrong to you because that's not what this system is for.
It threw me completely. My suspension of disbelief in the whole setup at that point, I have to agree, I was literally thrown out of it and gone, this isn't what it's all about.
No, it wasn't. It was terrible. It was like, I'm going to say it again. I said it in one of my other panels here. It was like watching Titanic and Twilight smashed into a Star Wars film. It was painful. It was just terrible.
Star Wars primarily, from its very concept, when we first come across it, really isn't isn't a romance.
No, not at all.
And that's where I think the first three films fell short. Is they tried to pigeonhole to stuff it into that romance hole, when really it's not. It's
not. No.
You
It's
could
an
do a
action-
whole panel on where Star Wars, where the prequel trilogy went wrong.
We
And I
will.
could-
We will.
I'm expecting. Well, I'd expect that to just turn into another episode of Movie Rants.
Yeah.